Hi, my name is Ryan Bennett with Lake Labish Farms. We farm in Brooks, Oregon. We farm onions and blueberries, hazelnuts, wheat, and grass seed. And our main crop is onions, and that's what we're going to look at today. And I farm with my dad and my brother. I would be a fourth generation farmer in my family. So it's been around a few years, and yeah, I enjoy what I do. It's just something different every day. Today we'll be harvesting. Soon we'll be working ground and planting grass and other crops. And other days I'm in the office, so it's very diverse. So that's what I enjoy about it. So our onions we plant in the springtime. We plant in late March or April. We plant about 200,000 seeds per acre. So there's a lot of little onions on the ground, and we plant yellows and reds, and they get exported kind of all over the world. And we have our own packing facility that does that. And then we have a lot of onions that stay close to home here too. So some of the seed we buy, we call it store-bought seed, which would be a hybrid. Other seed like this here, this is our homegrown seed. We call it Benny, and it's a red onion that is an open pollinated variety, which we are able to select mother bulbs. We look for a perfect bulb. We look for skin retention. We look for a small neck for easy to cure and dry, roundness, color. So if we select a mother bulb and then it gets planted the next year, it'll produce a seed pod, which will give us the seed for the next year. So an onion, it is a biennial, which is 2 years. It takes 2 years to complete its life cycle. So there's annual crops, biennial crops, and perennials. Perennials last many years. Annual completes its life cycle in 1 year. And an onion is a biennial. It takes 2 years. So we plant the seed and we get a bulb, and then we could take the bulb and plant the bulb to get the seed for our next crop. So, and with selecting bulbs for our future onion seed, we're looking for the tight skin, good skin retention, so it's more marketable. If the skin falls off and it looks like just more of a bare onion in the store, it's not as appealing to the eye, and the consumers don't like it when it's partly peeled, I guess. And then for the neck of the onion, if it has a small neck, that helps us to dry it down, to cure it. In our curing facility here, there's fans that are blowing through the boxes to help cure the onion and to help dry the neck of the onion down. Because if the neck of the onion stays wet, there's just a greater chance for disease. Here's a box of onions that we harvested recently. This is our open pollinated variety of Benny Red, and you can see some of them have a normal neck on them, where the neck is soft and it's cured down and it's dry. There's still good skin retention. You can take some off and there's still lots of skin on it. Where these, I found a couple here, these are called, that is a seed pod onion, where this onion was basically tricked into thinking, this is my second year of my life cycle, I'm gonna reproduce. So something, weather tricked it, soil temperature, something tricked it to think, I'm done. So it tried to send up a seed stock, which it did, and it produced a seed umbel. And this was out in our production onions. So this onion to us, it's good, but for marketing is bad. So we can't sell that onion. It has a hard stalk. You can't that's almost like a woody stalk. And if you cut the onion open, the center is hollow. So that would be, this is a non-marketable onion. It could sell maybe as a number 2, but not as a number one. Number one onion has to be a perfect onion with no disease, no decay. Here's an example. Wow, I happened to just pick up one that is rotten. So there's a rotten onion, that would be a root rot. Pretty common not to have every onion be perfect. Sometimes they go bad. We don't know why. And here's another small onion that was a seed pod. Same thing. If you cut it open, it's got a hollow center, non-marketable. Our onions are lifted in the fall. We have machines that dig the onions and lay the onions on top of the ground. And this would be an example of, this was all green leaves when the onion was standing and growing in the field. And then we have a digger that comes and lifts it and sets the onion sideways on the ground to help everything dry. And it's all just natural sunlight, the heat of the day that takes all the moisture from the onion leaves, and it dries all this out. And there's actually a lot of nutrients in these leaves too. A lot of calcium, which this calcium is brought down through the neck of the onion into the onion bulb. And that's why when you squeeze these onions, they're super hard. It's calcium. And every layer in the onion has calcium in it, and the harder and tighter we can make this onion, the more storability we can have. We can store these onions all the way into next spring. Here it is fall. We just harvested in September, and these onions can store all the way into even into May. So, and then when they get lifted, there are sometimes where there are defects from the sun that if it gets too hot after we lift, here's an example of a sunburned onion, which I was talking about more defects with the seed pods, how they're not marketable. This would be not marketable either. So when the onion is growing, half of the onion is above the soil and the other half is below the soil. Then when we lift it, it gets turned on its side. This happened to be sitting just perfectly faced towards the sun. The bottom half is always the part that gets burned because that's the half that's the most tender. The top half is already hard and it's already kind of seasoned, and it's kind of gone through lots of heat during the summer. The bottom half, this is its first time seeing daylight and sunlight, so it's just a lot tender. So we try to limit as much as we can of this by selecting a better, like a ideal time, which would be in the 80s. Anytime we're in the 90s, even 100 degrees, we just let the onions sit in the ground and we won't even pull them out. Once it cools down into the 80s, low 80s, that's when we come in and lift them. So every row, every section of onions we put in here, we tag it and mark it, and we know exactly what the variety is, what field it came off of, and the day it was harvested. This helps with our traceability. If there happens to be a problem, whether it's a food safety problem or a quality problem, we know exactly where it came from, the day it was harvested, and for when it's packing, when we're packing it later at the packing facility, then we know where it's at in the barn. So this room that we're in here, this is called an air plenum. And what this does is we have fans that create a lot of pressure. We have the fans turned way down right now just so we could be in here talking. But it charges this room with air pressure, and with the air pressure it needs to get relieved somewhere, so it goes through these slots, and these slots are cut the same height as the onion box, and as the onion box is stacked on top of each other, it gives it a place for the air to move across the top of the box and push all the way through to the other side. What we're doing is we're taking any moisture, all the moisture always wicks to the top, so we're taking that top moisture and we're pushing it off the top of the pile. And when that moisture is removed, it exhausts out the other side of the barn. So we have to get rid of the moisture in order to keep our crop dry. If we're trying to dry the crop in here, we will introduce heat, which we have the natural gas and the capability to heat the whole inside of the barn to help cure and dry the crop. The faster we can dry it, the more efficiently we can dry it, the better chances we have of having a good crop, good storing crop by limiting disease. Okay, right now these fans are set at level 1 and they go up to 100. So we're gonna turn them up and we'll show you what that looks like. So we just came out, we're one door away from the fans, actually two doors. One door to go in, and this is a separate room. And the fans are pulling so much air. Watch how hard it's pulling this door. I have to work hard to pull this door open. That's how much air it's pulling. So here's an example of one of our onion planters. This is done in the spring of the year, and we'll till the soil, and when the conditions are dry and the timing's correct, we go out and we'll seed the crop. And we put the seed in the little baskets, or not baskets, little hopper, called a hopper. So the seed will go in here. We'll dump the seed in there. And this is a vacuum planter, which means the seed is pulled against a plate that has holes on it. And as that plate turns, the vacuum will turn off at the very bottom where the seed's supposed to drop, and the seed will drop. And we can change the spacing depending on what gear ratio. We can change the sprockets, and we can make it plant the onions tight together. We could plant them super tight, or we could plant them far apart. It just depends on how big we want the onion to get. If we plant them really close together, they're not going to get very big. They're going to be a lot of smaller onions. So, but if we don't want to go too wide, because then we'll have a bunch of really big onions with really big stiff necks that they're harder to store, harder to sell. So we're trying to get that balance of about a 3-inch onion is what we kind of typically go for. And when we put the seed in the ground, we're also putting fertilizer in as well. So here is a fertilizer tube that'll go. This will cut a V in the dirt, and the seed will drop out through the bottom of the shoe into the dirt. The fertilizer it'll lay right on top of the seed, and as the planter keeps moving forward, this little bar will take the loose dirt and it'll fill that little V back in. And then this is a packer wheel. The packer wheel rolls behind to smush the dirt, make good soil contact with the seed, and it just to help pack it down a little bit. There's some other fertilizer shanks up front here. This would be a side dress, and we'll have to side dress fertilizer sometimes depending on how acidic the fertilizer is. It could burn the seed, so that's why we want to put it away from the seed, and we have to shank it in. Other fertilizers we can put right on top of the seed and it won't hurt it. Here we're harvesting the onions. This machine is picking the onions up off of the ground that are already pre-dug. They've been sitting for a couple weeks to dry and cure. And these onions will go up this chain. You'll see it in action here in a minute. The onions will go up this chain. There's actually a blower right at the very top that blows from the bottom side of the chain, and it blows air up through the chain to stand the tops up. When the tops are stood up, there's a sickle bar, a knife that cuts those tops off, and it blows the tops off out the back. Then all we're left with is the bulbs, just the onion bulb inside the truck. are grown on a 60-inch bed, so every 5 feet there's a gap, and then it's lines of onions, which on the onion planter you can see each row of onions, and every 5 feet there's another break. There's a break, it gives us a place to drive through for maintenance, for spraying, for digging, harvesting, and it also helps with airflow. So when the onions are growing and the onion tops are up this high, it's a solid mass of green. And when you have an aisleway for the air to flow, it helps with our disease pressure. We can help keep things drier because we're constantly watering the onions, and with water and heat comes humidity. And if we have a little break, it gives a place the air can flow through and help dry things out. Normally in dry conditions, we'll have onions that'll look more like this that we're picking up. They're more naturally clean. But since we have all the rain, everything's got really wet, and we have actually gone through and returned them with the onion digger to fluff the ground, to help everything dry more and to help get the onion up out of the mud. So it has helped, but it's still not quite as good. So you can still see there's dampness wherever the onion bulb is touching the ground. There's still dampness in the soil, which we'll just have to work a little harder when we're packing to get that dirt off. So here's an example of an onion in the field that was trying to go to seed. It was trying to produce a seed bulb. It thought it was in its second year, but really we planted it from seed. It should not do this until the bulb is planted, and then it tries to go to seed, not from seed to bulb. So that's an example of a seed stock on an onion. So here's where we dump the onions. We get it ready for storage. The truck obviously is dumping into a hopper. You see two hoppers together because we can increase our speed for unloading a truck, double the capacity. So the truck will dump into the hoppers. The hoppers fill the boxes. They'll be filled. The guys level them off, move them over. Forklift comes and picks them up and takes them in the barn for storage. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ask your teacher, and I'll hope to get back to you on the next video.